As 45 continues gaslighting America about the coronavirus, the repugs face a critical choice. The gulf between reality and 45's delusional vision of a waning coronavirus threat was on full display this weekend, as cases soared in key hotspots while he delivered speeches at Mount Rushmore and the White House, with little physical distancing and few masks directly contradicting the advice from his public health experts. Playing with fire at a time when experts say the spread of the virus appears to be spiraling out of control, 45 continued gaslighting Americans about the threat to their health during the 4th of July speech from the South Lawn of the White House, where he minimized the dangers of COVID-19 with the baseless statement that 99% of the coronavirus cases are harmless, a claim his Food and Drug Administration chief would not back up on Sunday morning. With many Americans flouting public health guidelines during the holiday weekend, 45's conduct is creating an inflection point for the GOP at a time when his poll numbers are tumbling. With American lives on the line, the question now is whether members of the Repug Party will continue to stand by in silence as the squatter peddles fiction about a deadly virus, and if so, will they pay a price at the ballot box in November? While Repugs deserted 45 on the issue of facial coverings, with many urging the Americans to wear masks over the past week, they have been mostly silent about 45's effort to deceive the public about the risks that the virus poses. 45 spent the weekend raging about protecting statues of American heroes with racist past while setting an irresponsible example as the virus spreads. This time, the GOP silence could become complicity, jeopardizing public health and safety as well as American lives. I think the squatter is stepping forward, not really. GOP Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, who faces a competitive re-election in November, told CNN's Dana Bash in State of the Union on Sunday when asked whether she thought that what she thought 45 had exhibited as failed leadership on coronavirus. Instead, she criticized former President Barack Obama on the Ebola in 2014. The only problem with the Ebola and the coronavirus is that only 2 people, I think, died from the Ebola, and over 129,000 people have died from the coronavirus, so who's failed more would be 45. The squatter's failing poll numbers, particularly in swing states in his matchup against former Vice President Joe Biden, are now an area of intense concern over the repugs, and many longtime GOP strategists are puzzled by his dual strategy of ignoring the virus while trying to incite a racist war. A majority of Americans do not approve of 45's handling of the pandemic or his response to the nation's racial reckoning, which has stirred consternation even in his own campaign as the squatter banks on an economic revival and good news about a vaccine to restore his political fortunes, which probably won't happen anytime soon. But 45 waded even deeper this weekend into his controversial campaign strategy of trying to distract from the virus with what we refer to as race-baiting rhetoric. At Mount Rushmore on Friday, 45 described protesters as the left-wing fascist mob that is trying to end America by erasing the nation's history and indoctrinating its children. On Saturday night at the White House, he compared his attempt to defeat the radical left to the efforts by the United States to eradicate the Nazis. That's not how it works, but While Friday and Saturday speeches marked new heights in terms of inflammatory language from the squatter, many repugs had long been uncomfortable about 45's penchant for falling back on culture war tropes and racially incendiary language that he thinks stirs fealty to him within his base. Late last month, as 45's poll numbers continued to stink over his handling of the protest, Senate Majority Whip John Thune, who's a South Dakota repug, told CNN that 45 was good with his base, noting that the people who would decide in November are the people in the middle. As the public health officials sound the alarm about a surge of new coronavirus cases throughout the country, the White House task force dedicated to the pandemic did not meet this weekend. A person familiar with the schedule told CNN's Caitlin Collins, though a meeting was scheduled for Monday afternoon, though the task force has started meeting more regularly in recent weeks. After a period with few meetings, it has not resumed meeting on the weekends like it did in the early months of the outbreak. The task force officials were invited to the 4th of July event on the South Lawn, where there was little social distancing and a few people wore masks. One person said, while several attended the festivities, others declined that particular invite. Meanwhile, the squatter's view that the U.S. has turned the corner on COVID-19 has also increasingly isolated him from the key repug leaders, like Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who are pleading with the public to wear masks and stay at home. Yet the squatter's punitive nature and the long list of people he has fired or tweeted about negatively after they contradicted him still makes the GOP elected officials and his own public health experts loath to criticize or to correct him at all. An example of that dynamic came Sunday, when Dana Bash repeatedly pressed the U.S. Food and Drug Commissioner, Dr. Stephen Hahn, to explain the squatter's false statement that 99% of the coronaviruses are totally harmful. Hahn said that he was not going to get into who was right and who was wrong. Hahn is a member of the White House coronavirus task force. This is what he had told Dana Bash during CNN's State of the Union when she asked him to explain why the squatter made the claim when his public health experts have said exactly the opposite. What I say is that we'll have data in the White House task force. That particular data shows us that this is a serious problem. People need to take it seriously. The FDA chief said, yeah, then 45 should take it seriously, but he isn't. One exception was the repug mayor of Miami-Dade County, Carlos Jimenez, who contradicted the squatter Sunday as he finds his county in a difficult predicament. The virus is not harmless. He's absolutely not. Jimenez had told Sunday on CBS News Face the Nation, noting the positivity rate is around 20% in this area. He said that more Floridians need critical care. When you have more cases, you obviously will have more hospitalizations, more ICUs, more respirators, and unfortunately you will have more fatalities, Jimenez said. Meanwhile, 45's former Homeland Security Advisor Tom Bossert tweeted the ominous message Sunday: "We are in trouble. Once a state is over 1% prevalence, it becomes much harder to extinguish that flare-up." This is what Bossert had tweeted. It would take a huge effort to put out these. It would take a huge effort to put out these outbreak fires. More than the mask alone, we could top 5,000 deaths this year if this trend continues. Even though the U.S. coronavirus fatalities are a little bit down, there are a few signs that the virus is going to disappear. The spike in patients is overwhelmed some Texas hospitals as concerns grow about shrinking capacity in the intensive care units. Florida set an all-time hot record for the most cases in a single day Saturday, surpassing the previous record set in New York in mid-April. Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb warned on Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation that there is no clear line of sight on how we're going to get this under control. The political polarization of the virus, driven in no small part by conflicting messages from 45 and its public health experts, was in the spotlight over the holiday weekend. Though the coronavirus cases rose in 34 states over the previous week, and 12 states recorded an increase in cases of more than 50%, according to the Johns Hopkins University data, beaches in some parts of the country. Beaches in some parts of the country were packed with people, while others remain empty. The weekend images emerged of partygoers dancing and shouting with no social distancing at an event in Diamond Lake, Michigan, and closely packed crowds at a Wisconsin water park. Cases are declining in 3 states, Kentucky, Vermont, and the swing state of New Hampshire, where the 45 campaign announced that the squatter will hold a Klein rally Saturday at Portsmouth International Airport. The crowd will be in a hangar with the overflow crowd outside. The campaign said that there will be ample access to hand sanitizer and all attendees will be provided a face mask that they are strongly encouraged to wear. But that particular concern is that the squatter's descriptions of an innocuous virus will lead his supporters to let their guard down. In direct contradiction to 45's totally harmless assertion, the U.S. case fatality rate from coronavirus stood at 4.6% this weekend, according to Johns Hopkins University data. The World Health Organization has said that 20% of all people who are diagnosed with the coronavirus are sick enough to need oxygen or hospital care, and while the CDC estimates that a third of coronavirus cases are asymptomatic, that does not make the disease any less dangerous, since people with mild or no symptoms can pass the virus on to others. As of Sunday, the death toll in America had surpassed 129,000 American lives. The Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber, a Democrat, told CNN's Boris Sanchez Sunday that the situation in Miami is going to get much worse, and he said the disconnect between the reality on the ground and the squatter's message is making it much harder to force Floridians to heed the guidance of health experts. "We're telling people to make sacrifices, put on masks, socially distance themselves from people they love to make sacrifices for others," Gelber said. Friday night, the squatter is hosting this huge event where none of the countermeasures were being followed. So how do we tell people to swallow every difficult medicine when the squatter, by his action and his words, is telling them they don't have to? A growing number of Americans do not trust the squatter's information about the virus. I know I don't. Only 26% of the registered voters trust 45 to give accurate information about the coronavirus, according to last according to last month's New York Times Siena College poll. While about 77% of the registered voters trusted the CDC, it is not yet clear what damage that may inflict on 45's fellow repugs with their squatter on the top of the ticket in November, and whether they will continue to stand with him as his message becomes even more dangerous.